as an information one, I'm happy to move that we receive that, and it will be seconded by Councillor Baker. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. We're going to item 8, which is the Chief Financial Officer and the Chief Executive's update. How are we getting on with the CCO reform decisions we made last year? Phil and Ross, welcome. We also go into the no longer confidential item C1 after we've finished this one. So I'll invite the Chief Executive and the Chief Financial Officer to lead us on this discussion. It's possible that Gary Blick might be available online, I'm not sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Kia ora, morena councillors. As the Mayor said, we've got the Q2 report following this to discuss, so I'll keep commentary about financial and service performance matters pretty brief, and likewise Ross probably will as well, otherwise we'll duplicate with that item. Suffice to say that the key headlines are good. We can't take our foot off the pedal at this point in the financial year, certainly, but we're in good shape with a favourable year-to-date situation with expenditure, about $44 million favourable at the council end and 100 odd at the group level. In terms of revenue, council parent organisation is 9% favourable in terms of revenue budgets. We've continued to make good progress with savings targets. There's high levels of completion against the capital program, 96 odd %. But I'll leave it there and suggest that discussion waits to the next item, but pleased with where we are at the moment. Likewise, in terms of service performance, things are pretty stable. There are no significant drops in performance. It's pretty much holding steady or slight improvements across a range of metrics there. Importantly, there have been a much reduced number of closures of facilities for staffing reasons. We were striking a bit of a problem in terms of maintaining staffing ratios in certain of the centres. That problem's significantly fixed now, and there are much fewer of those situations arising. And there continues to be growth in usage, sort of 8% year on year for leisure memberships, 4% for library memberships, and so on. I'll leave that there. I wanted to mention emergency management. You should be aware that following the 2023 items, you're well familiar with what we've done in terms of review activity and responding to that. At a national level, there were similarly reports done. Sir Jerry Mataparai led an important report assessing the national response that concluded that there was some work needed at a NEMA level in terms of the national agency. We have been involved recently in discussions with both NEMA and Minister Mark Mitchell in that regard. I think the important thing I wanted to convey to you is that in looking at that national emergency management response, possibly unsurprisingly, they have concluded that local coordination of emergency response is still critical and central to the overall model. So we have an ongoing role. The legislation that they're working on now will reflect that. And I might say that in those discussions, and this is credit to the team that's been working on this, the Minister and NEMA are very pleased with progress at our end in terms of improved planning, preparedness, capacity and such like. Not that there's room for complacency at all, but we're in a much improved situation there. Excuse me. Election planning is well underway. That cycle will thrill you. Are you questioning my? I better be careful here, Councillor. You should be aware that planning's well underway now. It's an important event. It needs to run smoothly. The public and yourselves need a high degree of assurance that it's robust. So that's happening. There's a number of things that are being revisited alongside that. Given historically a 40% turnover at local board level, it's really critical that we're well placed to induct, train people to fulfil their governance responsibilities post-October. So that type of planning is well underway. You can ask us some questions outside of this forum if there's an interest there in what that looks like. There will be guidance coming out to you and all local board members about the sort of rules of engagement here, matters like the use of resources needing to be separated in relation to political and election activity. I think you're experienced and know the drill, but you'll see communications in that regard. Now, importantly, I want to talk to you about the CCO changes, and I have David Rankin, Toby Shepherd, and others in the room. Should you have questions at a detailed level, we probably don't have the luxury of time to deep dive into the detail here, but an invitation to talk to us offline if you want to understand more of the detail about how this is coming along. It's important to note that we are working towards a late June go live for any changes in the way things operate. That means that in order to fulfill our requirement for staff consultation around those changes and to have engagement with stakeholders and yourselves, we're well into it now and need to have a formal change proposal ready for, I think, mid-March. 14th of March comes to mind. Toby's nodding at me. So we're right into that phase now. We have been working closely with staff from the different areas, with other stakeholders, and very closely with the Mayor's office in this regard. There are staff sessions underway right now to talk through those changes. We had a session earlier this morning for 300 staff. There is another one at 1 o'clock, and depending on how we're going with this agenda, you might see me disappear in that regard. And again, I'm not going to be able to go into a huge amount of detail, but it's important to convey the key themes here. So where we are heading, the proposition that will be on the table is the formation of an integrated development entity, which we are, as a working title, calling the Auckland Development Office. This will take the urban regeneration activities from Eke Panuku. It will join them with a number of other folk in that development space, the purpose being to help unlock in a strong fashion the potential of council to bring private and government investment into an area to achieve the type of development outcomes we want for the city in terms of jobs, growth, housing, prosperity. And I'm simplifying this, but that's the notion, to really support the type of development we want end to end in a really grunty way. That's the thesis around that aspect. It will include the elements of commercial property management that makes sense to sit alongside that. Property is a quite, I won't get into this too deeply. We've done a review of property activity across this. There are pockets of property related activity, and it does need to be moved into a slightly more coherent picture. That's part of it. There are other dimensions I won't go into today. It will include the folk who need to shepherd major projects, major infrastructure projects, and so on as well. In the economic development space, we're looking at a department that is separate to that, but which shares, to some extent, some shared objectives. We need the development of particular locations in the region, both green and brownfields, and we need, alongside that, the economic development focus. So working like this, but not necessarily being in exactly the same unit. So that's the thesis there. There are some economic development related activities that weren't in Tātaki Auckland Unlimited. They were in the council, and there's a bringing together of some of those with the common theme of powering up economic development. In the events space, the direction that we're pursuing here, firstly, if I just talk to the non-structural aspect, there is an intention to have an Auckland Council branded events, to have all Auckland Council funded events branded commonly, with no clutter around that, if you like, in terms of line of sight for the community around Council's responsibility and the funding line. You will recall you previously made the decision that major events remain with Tātaki Auckland Unlimited. It makes sense to empower Tātaki with responsibility for a regional events calendar where the public and yourselves can see all of the events activity that's happening across the region, whether they're run by Tātaki or run by anyone else, in order that the What's On in Auckland focus is available to everyone in a really coherent fashion. There are local events management that doesn't make sense to sit there. They're often local, very local. They're often funded or supported at a local board level, and those things probably make sense to stay in the core organisation, recognising that, however, they will be branded similarly and they will be part of the calendar that Tātaki will own. So that will tidy up quite a lot of the events management space. I won't go into activation activity, but there is a range of activities that, strictly speaking, you wouldn't define them as events, but we need some clarity about how and where they operate, because there are pockets of those activities that should be considered. Your Worship, I think I'll leave it there. Those are the key themes. I want to make an offer on behalf of myself and David and Toby and others, Max, that we're available to talk through any of that detail with you and to respond to any questions, possibly better outside of this forum than here. Just very finally, in terms of my update, while it's a separate item on the agenda and we'll discuss it later, I do want to commend the regional deal paper to you. I believe this is a pretty high quality piece of work. I think there's been excellent collaboration between the staff and Mayor Wayne and his office, and I believe that it both captures the right vision in terms of where the future of the city needs a bit of attention, and aligns very well, deliberately so, with government priorities in order that we can get this off the ground. That discussion will follow later. I'm simply commending to you and thanking the staff who have worked on it. I will leave it there and ask Ross to comment.
Thanks, Paul. CFO now, please.
Good morning, everyone. So firstly, annual budget. So we are out for annual budget consultation starting tomorrow, running through to from 28th of February to the 28th of March. The consultation documents were adopted at the Budget Committee last week. The topics have been well covered. It includes event funding, local board plans, and also just sets out the investment plans, rates increase and all those kind of things for next financial year. So there's lots of space for the community to comment on whatever they want to in that space. The thrust of the annual plan is delivering year 2 of the LTP, but it's always important to check in with the community and see if those plans are still relevant, or if there's any other things that's on their minds that we want to factor into the process. There will be an elected member handbook coming out to you very shortly, which just sort of summarises the key content, the key messages, where to find information, some information around social media, etc. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. It'll help support you through that consultation process. Outside of the consultation itself, there's work going underway at a staff level to refresh and scrub budgets across the council group. We're expecting to get information through from CCOs in the next few days. We've been a lot of focus on the Auckland Council organisation to date. Some of that's been looking at what are the cost and revenue trends. As we signalled late last year, there were a few pressures in there and a few risks, not at the scale of the $300 million challenge, more like sort of 10 to 20 million. At the moment, that's looking a little bit more challenging than it was, not massively at that scale, but some of those things are looking slightly less favourable going forward, things like electricity costs, gas costs, and some maintenance costs. So we'll look through all that stuff and we'll bring all that stuff through to the Budget Committee. The focus is, how do we look at those costs, manage that within the existing parameters. So there's just some work for us to do at a staff level, and we'll bring all that through to the Budget Committee. Not really sort of fundamentally the change, the overall shape of the budget or changing the consultation, just the normal sort of budget challenges and process we need to work through. The other report that's going out, interim report, went out this morning. So that's the financial results for the half year up to 31 December 2024. So that was released this morning to the NZX. As it's been discussed, there's a report on the agenda today around the Q2 performance. So that's the same period. It's kind of a management view, more of a performance view. The interim report takes more of a statutory view, but it's the same information really for the same period. That was on the confidential agenda because we can't disclose that information until things are released to the NZX. But given that's happened this morning, we can now talk about that in open. So all that information is all open and can be discussed freely from now. I won't go into the detail of what interim reports is because we'll cover that in the Q2 item shortly. In terms of updates for January, so there is a financial dashboard that's been distributed. It sort of continues the trends. The trends from the December quarter have kind of broadly continued. At a group level, just at a high level at December, and in the interim report, talks about capital investment being sort of largely in line with budget. Some projects have been delayed, buyouts have accelerated, and basically it kind of means we end up pretty much bang on budget as of December. In January, things have slowed down a little bit, and you've got capital investment for the group, including the buyouts, are running about 96% of budgets. But still, capital investment quite strong, close to budget overall. In terms of group operating performance, it was favourable in the interim reports. It's got slightly more favourable. So across the group to January, year-to-date operating performance about 100 million favourable to budget. We're seeing group revenue 2% favourable, and that's sort of the continuation of strong revenue through the ports, strong regulatory revenue, offset a little bit by slightly lower water volumes. In the expenditure side of things, at a group level, 2% favourable to budget on expenditure. It may even be the latest numbers 3% favourable, so it's increased slightly, but it's kind of broadly online. With Auckland Council, as Phil's indicated, sort of 9 to 10% favourable year to date. For for Auckland Council as the organisation. In the half year, we were basically bang on budget with expenditure. So that's slightly improved in January. We've seen Auckland Council expenditure being a slightly favourable, 2% favourable. So operating picture is slightly improved over the last month. In terms of, sort of CapEx delivery highlights, for Auckland Council, there's been some great work in the park. So Fred Taylor Park and Te Aratū Peninsula Park, there's been some LED light upgrades completed. There's been some key repair work completed in January. Jack Butt Lane at Muriwai Regional Park has been completed. And there's some emergency pipe renewals completed in Remuera 34 Shore Road. In the CCO space, so a lot of flood response work completed in January, repairs to Takutu Road, Pine Valley Road and Duck Creek Road. Some network optimisation at Weymouth Road roundabout improvements have been completed. In water care space, the first permanent non-potable tanker filling station is opened in Mangere, and some surveys, key surveys completed for the Warkworth Northwest Growth Area. So those are probably the key results and highlights for January. I think that is about it. We will go dive a little bit more into the results for the 6 months and the Q2 item. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that, Ross. Just before I go to questions, I'll move this recommendation. It'll be seconded by Councillor Fletcher. I've got a question from Morris Williamson.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Can I just check, first of all, Phil, this thing called the monthly financial dashboard, which we've got in confidence, and we are now allowed to talk about anything that's in here?
Yes, you are. It's the disclosures already.
Okay, can I then ask you some questions about the two items that are the most unfavourable on page 5? There is a thing there called vested assets where we're down 31 million, and there's another one in there, development contributions, where we're down 28. So it comes to 59 million. But the explanations for vested assets says refer explanation on page 6. But I can't see the little bit that's written on page 6, how I can even make sense of what that says. It doesn't really tell me anything about vested interest. And under development contributions, 21% unfavourable, I would have thought a little bit more of a breakdown about where that was occurring and why, rather than it's just down. It doesn't help me in terms of looking at these financial data. I need a much better explanation of that number.
Excuse me, you could have raised this with the author of the paper before.
Oh, all right, okay.
But,
Okay.
well,
No,
I'll let him
no,
answer
I'll
it
take
now,
that.
but that was the point of the little note at the start of our thing saying, please,
I'll take
if
the
you've
hit.
got small ones, raise them with the author. But you can
I'll,
answer that or not.
No, it's fine. I'll get Ross to comment. I suppose this is a fairly new product. It probably tries to strike a balance between giving a summary and a high level, but with detail in the Q2 report. Yeah. There might be something to learn from there, Councillor, I accept. Ross, do you want to comment?
Yeah, both. Councillor Dalton, please.
Thank you.
Sorry, point of order. Is Ross able to answer he was just about to answer, or is it?
Yes, so I think apologies, in terms of the I think there's a page number reference there. I think with page 6 you refer to page 4. So I think as the Chief Executive has explained, this is a summary. It tries to find that balance between short, simple summary, not too much for you to absorb, versus a deep dive and a big pack every quarter. In terms of vested assets, for Auckland Council, it's a reduction there, because what has happened is less CRL assets transferring across than expected. At the group level, there's a favourable variance, and that is the old state highway going north. So with the new motorway to Warkworth has opened, the old state highway has come across. So at a group level, we've got all this extra road, and at the parent level, we've got less CRL assets coming across. So that is the driver of those things. Development contribution is revenue is down, we've set a new policy, and we're seeing less development activity, less consents coming through that have to pay those DCs. Those are kind of the main.
Okay, thank you for
drivers.
that. Councillor Dalton, please.
Thank you very much. I'd like to just refer to attachment 1, which is the memo to the CEO's report, specifically to the CCO progress. The Eke Panuku directors, it's probably a question for the Mayor actually, or the Mayor's office. The Eke Panuku directors have had no communication about what is happening. So they read what they read in the paper after the governing body's decision. I think it would be respectful for the governors who made that decision to write to the Eke Panuku board directors and let them know that they will no longer be required at some point. At this point in time, they don't know when that is. It's the right thing to do. It's not right that they should be reading this in the paper. So I felt that this was a governance decision, the role. I don't see it as the role of the transition manager to do that, to have those communications with the board of directors. So can a letter come from the Mayor on behalf of the governors to the board of directors, letting them, just confirming the decision was made and this is when we expect your services will no longer be required?
Well, I think we were involving the transition group because to clarify exactly what stage they won't be required. The other ones are all getting a statement, a letter of expectations, and there'll also be a letter of expectations sent to those that are expected not to be expected. So I think they are quite well informed, but I'll take your point.
I was at the meeting yesterday, they're not informed, so I think a letter would be appropriate. And further to that, further in the report at point 24, where it talks about, because this might be adding to some confusion for them perhaps, one of the options discussed in staff advice last year was a board with oversight of the activities of a potential business unit. A board would provide external governance capability and commercial and industrial expertise to assist with complex commercial and development issues. Perhaps they might think their role might be continuing, but in a different form, because it sounds like we might be having a board, as we do now.
I think the, look, I'll own this and we'll ensure that that situation's rectified in terms of absolute clarity.
Sorry to interrupt you. It is a governance matter, so it's not for you to own.
Well, that's a debatable point.
Well, it's my view. But just on the next bit about the board, the new board, potential new board.
I think it's really important to understand we are contemplating a board mechanism in relation to this activity in order that we have access to those skill sets around commercial property management, investment and such like. But this is not a CCO, it's not a company, and it can't be likened to a board where independent directors have that fiduciary responsibility as directors. It will be of a slightly different nature, and we're working on the detail of that, and we'll share it in due course. Even that is worth clarifying to the existing board, I accept.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Darby, please.
Yeah, and just before I go to my two key points, I want to reinforce that. That surprises me. It really does surprise me. So I did stress, I highlighted a number of symptoms, risks in the CCO reform, and for professional directors to be, I'm hearing not informed, even as of today, sufficiently or otherwise, formally, does concern me. Now, I don't want to lay the blame here. It just needs to be closed off. It's a misstep. It's a very basic misstep, and it's one of the things I highlighted that we have to get right through this reform. And I also want to pick up on the memo that came out. At paragraphs 56 and 57, the risks are highlighted. It's good to have the Transition Director, David Rankin, with us here today. I at the time we made this decision, I said, I think, actually it was after Chief Executive, I said it's really important that the councils, the mayor and the councillors see a risk profile. We have paragraphs 56 and 57 particularly in the memo, highlighting the risks in narrative form. Is there not merit in seeing a more structured dashboard risk profile, you know, from green light to red light, which is consistent with how most of the CCOs operate and this council operates, so you can home in very quickly and see where you are on particular risks. It's very hard to read a paragraph 57 as to the degree of risk. So that's my first question to either to yourself or to the transition director.
David's very welcome to come forward and comment. I accept the view. I would make the point that what you can't see is the program management apparatus sitting in behind this, where there are sponsors, work stream leads, risk management, risk identification and management and so on, and quite a lot of detail in terms of the implementation program. I accept that that's visible to me and not you, but I can assure you it's there. David, anything you want to add?
Not much. We can add some further detail in the next monthly reporting, Councillor. Obviously, the Assembly of Risk Registers has been one of many pieces of work that had to be put together in the last few weeks, so we can make sure it's part of the next monthly report.
Look, I'd appreciate that, because that issue of capability and capacity is one that does concern me, and ensuring that there is, you know, continuity and delivery, and which is, I think, the first risk that is identified.
Yeah, they're both major areas of focus for us, because that's correct, that I think we all agree they are two big risks.
Thank you. The second point, just going back, and I think it's earlier in the memo, just scrolling up, bear with me. It's outlining the team that is involved, and the work stream leads, being 4 work streams, just focusing on work stream 3, transport reform. As we all know, AT is a big entity, big part of our CapEx and OpEx. What I didn't pick up earlier, but I'm identifying now, is the lack of an Auckland Transport appointed lead to work with the sponsor, who's the Director of Policy Planning and Governance, and also with the lead, the other lead is the Transport Reform Lead for Auckland Council. Is there not, David or
There, Councillor, there is an Auckland Transport lead, who happens to be the Chief Executive's Executive Officer as the key conduit. There are other Auckland Transport people involved, but that was at the initiative of the Chief Executive.
So not identified in terms of the leads here that are noted, like the Director of Economic Development at Te Tātaki is identified under Workstream 1. Are you saying that there should be somebody identified under Workstream 3? It's just not there at the moment.
I think it's just not visible on what you're reading, but it is in place.
Okay, if we could tidy that up or make it clear, that would be good. Thank you.
I do note that the Chief Executive of Iki Panuku is actually the head of the transition thing, so any board members at Iki Panuku who haven't noticed a difference, you'd have to question their ability to be aware of what's going on in the property sector, which is one of the reasons they were chosen. So I've got a question from Councillor Walker.
Mine's a comment, so I'll leave it to comments.
Okay. Councillor Hills, please, has a question.
Kia ora, thank you, Mayor, and thanks, Phil. That's great news around a business unit or whatever we're calling it, around the development office. That is what we'd hoped for, and you've promised, so that thanks for that. My concern is, and I know this is operational, so you don't have to answer it here, but maybe it's just a view, just my concerns of where if we want these units to be nimble and leading and continue work programs that Eki Panuku and Tātaki are doing, just do you have thoughts, maybe you can't say them, of where it sits and how, I've seen with ADO and design office in the past, the bits chopped off or not being able to make decisions and move forward to drive what is a huge work program that we've promised Aucklanders would keep going. So you may have words about that, or you may not want to talk about that with staff listening or whatever.
Look, I won't say too much at this stage. We're working on exactly where and how it plugs into the organisation in terms of reporting and such like. Some of what you're mentioning is dependent on the entity having the right delegations, the right ability to act. That's partly about what I need to do, and partly a clarity with yourselves about the extent of decision making that you want to devolve. I think importantly though, in that regard, it's right and proper that the governing body retains to itself the ability to determine which are the priority spatial areas that entity will work in and what the level of investment is in those areas. So there's a discussion that we'll need to come up to in that regard shortly.
Okay, that's helpful. And then the last question, and once again, it might be feedback you want to take back, but on the potential changes with Auckland Transport, and we still haven't been really clear about how the legislation might affect it or what we might do, I guess, are we making sure we're taking into consideration not only the ability to do delivery, because whether you like it or not, AT's actually very good at delivery, whether you like the outcome or not, that's political often, but how we make sure the cost is considered and the support is considered. Say if there's 21 road controlling authorities, I know that's not the plan, but some of the releases from government made it sound like that. Just what that would mean staff-wise, the number of people needed to support local boards on those sorts of projects or those sorts of decisions. Yeah, I know that looking back at other councils and hearing what other councils do, it is a significant amount of their work program to do that stuff. So just making sure we're constantly thinking about the cost and bureaucracy we might create by splitting it all.
Yeah, we're most certainly thinking about that. The specific resolution of the governing body calls on us to, requires us to bring options forward for how this could operate. So that's the immediate focus. Alongside that, it's fair to say what we're trying to do is deal at least at this stage with what the new Regional Transport Committee arrangement will mean in terms of the strategy, policy, direction setting component here, coming back to council, because I don't think that's in question either in terms of your priorities or the legislation at this stage, and we need to be ready to start that process in terms of the next RLTP. So we're working on that and bringing the options for the, to you in terms of anything more substantial than that with, AT.
Well, thanks, Phil. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay, two more questions. Councillor Leone and Councillor Fletcher, please.
Yeah, just some really quick questions. I know that you mentioned the regional events calendar, and I was just wondering, the feedback that I'm getting a lot is whether we would move towards some kind of app to make it easier for each local board area, because the calendar seems to be there's so many events that are happening. The other questions that I had just around the CCOs being brought in was in relation to procurement and when the contracting would be brought in. I know that we've got the group shared services, but have we actually got an idea of whether as a result of this we are going to also save some money?
Just talking to procurement, procurement's within scope for group shared services. The intention is to change the way that that's operated at a group level. And yes, there are savings anticipated from that. That's fundamental to the business case for group shared services. haven't got specific numbers in front of me, but yes, principally, we've got to either do the function better and or cheaper in order for the case for it to stack up, and that's what this is premised on.
Good question. Thank you, Councillor Fletcher.
Take on advisement the note about events calendar.
Thank you, Your Worship. I welcome the changes you have foreshadowed, and I do appreciate that any transition is complex to manage. But what I'm wanting to do, and I realise that we're looking at this report, but looking forward in terms of your role as CEO, where do you see this providing the opportunity for freeing up better decision-making going forward on things that we've heralded for a long time and our failure to be able to make progress on? For instance, the CRL stations, Mangawhau Station, and Mr. Rankin will know it's been a real bugbear with me that we haven't really maximised those commercial opportunities. What's your take on it, Phil, on where it will actually help empower and enable decisions and opportunities to be identified?
I think essentially what we're trying to create here is, and I do deliberately use the word something a bit more powerful in terms of, chasing those development opportunities. And the capability, the capacity around this will be greater by virtue of bringing it all together. I can't really say much more than that. I'm confident that it will serve that purpose.
I suspect this is something that we will be looking at more closely, but I just wanted to understand that you believe that this is really going to be an opportunity for us to be able to advance some of these opportunities.
I think it is. I think we've got to look at it. We've got to look at it in the round. This is a central theme, if you like, of the regional deal paper that's in front of you later today. The alignment of government, private sector and council's interests in terms of those development opportunities is the kind of central idea. And if you're familiar with Minister Bishop's speech the other day, he's talking that language, and we need to be joined at the hip with him in that regard. And I think we've got a mechanism here that will help.
Thank you for your work on this.
Okay, I'll go to comments now. And the gentleman, Councillor Turner, question or comment? Oh, sorry, one more question to come.
Thank you. Just when we share these services, there's a bunch of specific technical data programs that are in the background, and one is GIS. And I'm aware from a practical situation where GIS for a drain layer wasn't showing the pipes in the right places. That was some months ago. Then I found that Council and Watercare run two GIS programs, the same program, but they're separate, unit providers. And then I found the data on the Watercare GIS is nowhere near as confident as the data on the Council GIS. It's the Council GIS that the trades are having to access to see what they're trying to look up, what they're trying to look up. And then at yesterday's board meeting, I went to some trouble to ask some questions of Watercare and found that we have got a data connection stream between those two programs and have had since 2017. So the data in Watercare's GIS is already streaming into Council's GIS program. So it gives me not much confidence in how we're going to make sure that the cogs of this stuff works. Thanks.
Well, happily I am in a position to improve your level of confidence, because there's a GIS, and the situation's even more complex because Auckland Transport has an additional separate GIS system. The Watercare one is nearing the end of its life and needs replaced. There's a business case that's been to or further iteration, I think, coming to the Shared Services Board shortly. We want one system across the group with the right sort of data sharing in order to populate it. And for it to be run out of group shared services for the benefit of all. Now, Watercare are taking a significant lead in that. I'm oversimplifying it, but we're onto that issue and opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I can say that I've sat in a couple of group shared services meetings where there's been some strong encouragement that we end up with one set of GIS which covers all of those items. Good point, well made. We'll retire you guys, and I've got a comment from Councillor Wayne Walker.
Just a few comments. First of all, I'd just like to endorse the comment that Karen Leone made around an app, because otherwise the complexity of people finding things is going to be horrific. And a lot of people, in respect of local events, associate them with their local board and local area. It might not be a single local board, it could be a clustered approach, and it should be on the basis of what works for people in the area, because they don't necessarily even know what local board they're in, but they do know what suburb and the like they're in. I'd just also like to support the comment that Councillor Fletcher made around, lateral thinking and the like as it goes to the stations. My experience, having visited stations overseas in a number of countries, is the commercial opportunities for digital marketing, retail and the like are significant. And as far as I know, we're completely missing out on some of those things because they were never considered up front. In Taiwan, for example, the metro in Taipei receives no, I repeat, no subsidy from either local or central government because it's cash flow positive. It's positive. So these are the sorts of things that we should really inform ourselves around and should be actively looking at and sending some people there because we would learn so much. And I've raised this issue on a number of occasions. The other thing that I'll just raise, and I agree with Councillor Williamson, we should have some more transparency around documentation to support we're putting up, because the agenda item speaks to not just us, but members of the public. And I'm sure many of them would have a concern about the drop-off in development contributions and vested assets. So that's really important. And around the matter of the loss of board activity, frankly, the advisory circumstance that we're going to be moving to is going to offer more flexibility, nimbleness, arguably people across a range of disciplines and calibre that will be able to give us excellent advice. So I think that that's a really good move, and one would hope too significant savings.
Thank you for that, Councillor Walker. I think an app isn't a bad idea, but the app is only as good as the data on which it's based. And it is disappointing to find that there are lots of things going on in Auckland that some of us don't know about. So I think that is something that's definitely on the mind of the Transition Committee to get a better central so that someone can find out all the things that are there.
Through you, Mr Mayor, if I can just add one other comment, and it just goes to the way local events have been run as compared to events on the part of Tātaki. The local events are lean and mean. Sometimes they involve little or no cost, working with private parties and the like to do things across the local board space. I have a real concern that some of that gets lost and that we end up having a higher cost and admin regime. A real concern around that. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. I shall make a point of taking that up. I have been moaning a bit, considering that the biggest food festival in Auckland is actually the Otahu Food Festival, which wasn't actually notified. But we now have in the position it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour of receiving the monthly update from from the Chief Executive and the Chief Financial, please say aye. To the contrary, carried. We're going to the pink pages now. We're going to C1, which was confidential until